Let's talk about the ego specifically, a man's ego. Because if you want to understand how to get a man to obsess over you, really obsess over you, you need to understand this part of him. Not the part he shows you on a date, not the curated version of him on social media. I'm talking about the deeper part that drives his behavior when no one's watching, the part that gets wounded when he feels unseen, or electrified when he's challenged. That's where it all begins. See, a man's ego is fragile, but not in a pathetic way. It's fragile in the way that it constantly needs calibration. A lot of men are walking around with this unspoken hunger for affirmation. They want to feel chosen, impressive, respected. They want to feel like they matter, like they're enough, but they don't always know how to ask for it, so it leaks out in strange ways. When you meet a guy and you're overly warm, overly accommodating, when you act like you're already sold, what you're actually doing, without realizing it, is feeding his ego too fast. And the thing about giving someone too much too early is, they stop needing to earn it. That's the killer. You think that being kind and open and attentive will make him value you more. And don't get me wrong, it's not bad to be kind. But the energy behind it matters. If you're doing those things because you're already placing him on a pedestal, because you're hoping he'll choose you if you just show how great you are, he feels that. Men can sense that eagerness, and they won't say anything, but it changes how they see you. You've just told him his ego is safe. There's no chase, no uncertainty, no challenge, so he relaxes, stops trying, gets complacent, and before you know it, the attention starts to drift. Now, let me flip it. Think about a time when a man couldn't quite figure you out, when you didn't laugh too hard at his jokes, when you complimented him, but with restraint, when you seemed genuinely interested, but not desperate. What happened? He leaned in, he texted more, he tried harder. Why? Because his ego wasn't getting fed on a silver platter. He had to earn it, he had to prove something, and that, right there, is the trigger for obsession. You don't need to insult him. You don't need to tear him down. That's not what this is about. This isn't about manipulation. It's about disrupting the pattern. Most men are used to women giving away emotional intimacy too easily. So when they meet someone who doesn't do that, who holds herself to a higher standard, who doesn't flinch at his charm or bend over backwards for his attention, it unsettles him. In a good way, it makes him curious. He starts thinking, what does she know that I don't? And that, right there, flips a switch. You become the puzzle he can't solve, and we all know what happens when something isn't easily solved. It gets our focus. Our attention, our time, we keep returning to it in our minds because we need that closure. Men aren't exempt from that dynamic. In fact, because of how their egos work, they may be even more susceptible to it. The key is subtlety. It's not about being mean or withholding affection to punish him. It's about maintaining a sense of self so solid, so magnetic, that he can't help but feel like winning you over would mean something. That's when a man starts to become obsessed, not with the idea of controlling you, but with the idea of being worthy of you. Most people don't talk about this, but obsession, true obsession, comes from a place of emotional friction. A little tension, a little resistance. That moment where he's not sure he's doing enough. That moment where you look at him and instead of gushing, you pause, and he's forced to ask himself, did I impress her? Does she see value in me? That's the moment you become different from everyone else. That's when you stop being a quick hit of validation and start being a standard. And men chase standards. Don't get it twisted. This doesn't mean you play games. This doesn't mean you become cold or calculated. It just means that you recognize the power of not giving your approval too quickly. You let him come to you. You let him prove himself, because when he does, and when he finally gets that validation, it lands so much harder. It means more. He'll remember it, and he'll want it again. That's how obsession builds, slowly, through moments of uncertainty and reward, through the contrast of distance and intimacy. So, next time you feel that pull to overgive, to over-explain, to over-impress, pause. Ask yourself, am I feeding his ego, or am I letting him earn my energy? Because when a man has to earn it, he values it, and when he values it, he won't let it go, and that's when the obsession begins. One of the most underrated qualities that makes someone irresistible is mystery. And no, I don't mean being intentionally confusing or playing games to keep someone guessing. I'm talking about the kind of mystery that comes from being a whole, self-contained person, someone who has a life, a purpose, and an energy that doesn't orbit around a man's attention. That's the kind of mystery that makes a man obsessed. Men are naturally wired to be drawn to what feels slightly out of reach. Not completely unattainable that just becomes discouraging, but just far enough away that it activates their curiosity, their desire to know more, to understand you. Think about how different that is from the way most people approach dating. So many of us, when we like someone, our instinct is to lean in, to be available, to show interest, to answer every message right away, to match their energy, to make it clear, I'm here, I'm open, I'm not going anywhere. But the problem with that is, it removes all the tension, the polarity disappears, the intrigue vanishes, you become predictable. And once someone becomes predictable, they become easy to categorize, easy to place, easy to move on from. What actually creates obsession isn't constant availability. It's emotional unavailability in a very specific way. Not coldness, not distance for the sake of it, but a calm, steady detachment, a way of being that says, I'm enjoying this, but I'm also fine without it. That's where the power is. When a man senses that your mood doesn't shift based on how much attention he gives you, when he realizes your life is already full, already interesting, already vibrant, that's when he feels a shift. Suddenly, he starts asking himself, why doesn't she need more from me? What does she have going on that's more important than me right now? And that, right there, creates the spark. When you're too available, you become familiar, and men do not obsess over the familiar. They don't get addicted to what they fully understand. They get addicted to the edge, the unknown, the subtle friction of she's into me, but she's not all in. That's the sweet spot. When a man can't predict your next move, not because you're inconsistent, but because you're not emotionally clinging, he starts watching more closely. He listens harder. He studies your patterns. That's the early stage of obsession. I've seen this play out countless times. A woman walks into a room. She's not the loudest. She's not even the most physically stunning. But she holds herself like she knows something no one else does. Her energy doesn't rush toward anyone. She's not performing for attention. She's contained, and men notice. Because most people, men and women, are trying so hard to be seen, the moment you stop chasing that and just exist with certainty and self-respect, you become magnetic. Here's what most people don't understand. You don't need to talk about your value to prove it. You just need to live in a way that reflects it. When you have goals, hobbies, friends, and passions that don't stop because a guy entered the picture, he can feel that. When you don't immediately rearrange your schedule or become hyper-responsive to his needs, that calm detachment becomes deeply attractive. It's not that you're being rude, it's that you're anchored, and he can't help but want to be part of the world you've built for yourself. Think about it this way. Have you ever watched someone who just seems content, like truly okay on their own? There's something intoxicating about that. You want to know what makes them tick. You want to be the one who gets under their skin. That's exactly what a man feels when you stop being so quick to prove yourself and instead invite him to earn access to you. It's not withholding, it's discernment. It's showing that you don't let just anyone into your inner world. This mystery, this detachment, it doesn't mean being distant forever. It means being intentional with your energy. You're not performing closeness, you're not building fake walls, you're just allowing connection to happen on your terms, in your time. You're letting him experience just enough of you to keep coming back, but not so much that he feels he's already won the prize. The irony is, when you show a man that you're not afraid to lose him, that's when he's most afraid to lose you. Because he realizes you don't need him to feel complete. And people always value what they believe could walk away at any time. That doesn't mean you have to threaten to leave or play aloof. It just means you live in a way that constantly reinforces this one powerful truth. You were whole before he came along, and you'll be whole whether he stays or not. That's what makes a man obsessed, not neediness, not over-availability, not trying to prove your worth every second. It's the calm, confident detachment that keeps him wondering, what does she see in me, instead of assuming he already has you. And it's that wondering that keeps him coming back. There's this belief floating around that the way to keep a man hooked is to constantly lift him up, validate him, praise him, make him feel like a king at every turn. And while that sounds good on paper, the reality is a little more nuanced. Of course, encouragement matters. Of course, being supportive is important. But if you're always feeding his ego, always giving him emotional comfort without balance, you actually strip away one of the key elements that drives desire: tension. Specifically, the kind of tension that comes when a man isn't quite sure where he stands with you, that space between total comfort and slight uncertainty. That's where obsession brews. Men fall in love with women who shake something inside them, not women who constantly coddle their confidence. It's not about tearing a man down, it's about disrupting that autopilot behavior so many men fall into when they think they've already got you. When a man believes he's fully won you over, and there's no more ground to cover, no more validation to earn, he gets lazy. He starts to coast, and worse, he may begin to take you for granted. What actually keeps him engaged deeply, emotionally, is the feeling that he's still got something to prove. That he can't get comfortable just because you're there. And one of the most powerful ways to create that feeling is to shake his ego, just enough to remind him that your attention is not a guarantee. That could look like not laughing at a joke that wasn't actually funny. It could be pushing back on an idea he throws out instead of nodding along just to seem agreeable. It could be challenging his opinion in a way that shows you have a strong mind of your own. These small moments matter, because in those moments you're saying, I see you, but I'm not afraid to disagree with you. I'm not here just to make you feel good about yourself. I'm here to be real. And real is what grips someone's attention long term. When you do this right, you disrupt the usual flow of validation that a lot of men are used to. And that disruption doesn't scare them off, it pulls them in. It forces them to evaluate, am I showing up the way I should? Am I doing enough? That kind of reflection is powerful. And it often only happens when they're met with a woman who has no problem shaking the comfort zone a little bit. Let me give you a simple truth. Confidence is sexy, but challenge is addictive, and you don't get to the level of obsession we're talking about by being a mirror for his ego. You get there by being the one person who isn't afraid to be honest with him, not cruel, not dismissive, just honest. And when that honesty challenges how he sees himself, when it makes him pause and think, that's when he becomes emotionally activated. Men are attracted to women who reflect something new back to them, something that no one else dares to show. If everyone else is flattering him, and you're the one who dares to call him out in a loving way, you become the one he remembers. You become the one he thinks about when he's alone, the one he wants to impress, the one he can't quite crack. And that's where obsession starts, not in comfort, but in contrast. Now, this doesn't mean you're always pointing out flaws or criticizing him. That would just make you cold or combative. What I'm talking about is strategic disruption. It's in the way you let him know through your standards, through your reactions, through your energy, that his place in your world isn't set in stone. He doesn't get to slack off emotionally and still have access to you. He doesn't get to drift into inconsistency without consequences. When a man feels your respect has to be earned and can just as easily be lost, he doesn't just stay interested, he becomes deeply invested. There's a big difference between a man liking the way you make him feel and a man fearing the idea of losing your approval. That fear isn't unhealthy, it's human. We don't obsess over what's always available. We obsess over what we feel we have to work to keep. When you slightly shake a man's ego, not in a way that wounds him, but in a way that stirs him, you trigger his desire to rise, to show up, to evolve. That's what makes you unforgettable, because you weren't just another admirer. You were the catalyst, the person who made him question himself, push himself, improve himself, and more than that, you were the one who didn't flinch when he faltered. You challenged him, and through that challenge, he started seeing you as the woman he couldn't afford to lose. So yes, support him. Yes, be kind, but don't be afraid to keep him on his toes, because the moment you stop challenging him, you stop inspiring him. And when he stops being inspired, he stops being obsessed. And that's exactly where you lose your power. One of the most powerful shifts you can make in dating is realizing that your value doesn't come from being chosen. It comes from choosing. From knowing who you are, what you bring, and walking into every situation with the quiet confidence that you don't need to convince anyone of your worth. And when you master that, you tap into a version of feminine power that's magnetic, not because it's loud or aggressive, but because it's rooted. It doesn't chase, it doesn't beg, and it doesn't settle. It simply is, and that energy is what makes a man lose his mind over you. A lot of people confuse feminine power with submission or with being passive, but true feminine power isn't about being overly agreeable or sweet all the time. It's not about playing it safe or shrinking so someone else feels more secure. It's the exact opposite. It's being so in touch with yourself, your values, your boundaries, your vision for life, that you don't bend just to keep a man interested. That's the kind of power that stops a man in his tracks, because suddenly he's not just dealing with someone who wants to be loved. He's dealing with someone who knows she deserves it and refuses to accept anything less. When a man senses that, it changes everything. It pulls him into a different mode. Instead of just showing up to impress you, he starts showing up to earn you. Not because you've told him to, but because he feels your standard, even in your silence. He sees it in the way you say no to the things that don't serve you. He feels it in the way you don't chase when he pulls back. He notices it in the way you move on with grace instead of clinging when things get uncertain. That emotional self-respect becomes irresistible because it's rare, and anything rare becomes valuable. You have to understand that obsession isn't born from making a man feel superior. It's born from making him question whether he's good enough for you. And that only happens when you hold your ground, when you lead with calm confidence, when your energy says, "I don't need you to validate me. I already like who I am." Most people don't realize how deeply men are affected by that. They think men want someone to admire them constantly. And sure, admiration is part of attraction, but what sticks, what lingers in their mind long after the date ends, is the feeling that they've met someone who doesn't fall for potential, doesn't get swept up in charm, and won't trade their peace just to say they're in a relationship. That's when the chase begins. Because now it's not about impressing you for the sake of attention, it's about meeting your level, matching your energy, proving he can be part of the world you've already built for yourself. That's what creates the obsession. He doesn't just want you, he wants to be worthy of you. And that's a completely different energy than someone who just enjoys being admired. Now here's where a lot of people go wrong. They think they have to be cold to seem powerful. They think detachment means not caring. But that's not strength, that's fear disguised as confidence. Real power is warm and grounded. It's having the heart to care, but the courage to walk away when something doesn't align. It's smiling with kindness while still being clear on your limits. It's being emotionally available without being emotionally dependent. That kind of balance takes self-awareness. It takes discipline, and it's exactly what makes you unforgettable. The more in control you are of your own emotions, the more a man starts to feel like you're the one shaping the dynamic, not him. And that's when his investment grows. That's when he becomes obsessed, because he's not just drawn to your beauty or your charm, he's drawn to your strength, your emotional independence, your grace under pressure, the fact that your world doesn't crumble if he stops texting, that if he walks away, you don't chase, you elevate. And when you do that, you send a clear message. I am not the woman who begs to be seen. I am the woman who sees herself clearly and expects others to do the same. Men don't talk about this directly, but they feel it deeply. They feel it when they realize you won't compete for them. They feel it when you don't flinch at silence, when you don't rush to fix everything the second he pulls back. They feel it when you stop overgiving and start receiving, when you stop auditioning and start selecting. That shift doesn't just change how he sees you, it changes how he sees himself in relation to you. Suddenly, he's not just thinking about what he wants. He's thinking about whether he deserves you, and that is when you have his full attention. So if you want to make him obsessed with you, don't try to be the woman who fits his idea of perfect. Be the woman who fits your idea of powerful, because when you lead with that energy, he won't just chase you, he'll fight to keep you. And that's the difference between being liked and being unforgettable.